Preseason number one again. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Clemson Tigers with so much to get to. We got Ryan Cantor on the line from TigerNet and also Shaking the Southland on SB Nation. Ryan, how you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Boy, a lot going on in college football these days. Of course, the schedule release is typically months and months ago, but of course, we've got a revised situation. We will get to what that means for the Clemson Tigers here in just a second. Would like to remind everyone that if you love college football and want to get updated each and every day, please like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe right here at Mark Rogers TV. This is the number one team in the country, according to the coaches poll top 25. And we've got Ohio State at number 2, Bama at 3, Georgia 4, and LSU round out the top 5. No big surprises there, Ryan.
No, and I think when you're talking about the first two, it's Ohio State, it's Clemson, it's a coin toss, and Clemson's been winning that matchup lately and every time they've played. So I think for now Clemson deserves to be one, but I do think there's some serious concerns, and I think in what's I'm sure going to be a sort of wild, wacky season, there's probably more chance for maybe a lesser known or less expected team to rise up, just given the circumstances and madness of everything going on.
I myself don't understand the concept of who deserves to be number one. We just had a call-in show a few minutes ago, and so some people were taking the stance that, well, LSU should be number one since they won the national championship last year. And I said, okay, should that be a rule in play that the previous season's national champion should be the preseason number one? And they said, well, most of the time. And I said, well, why are we making certain exceptions for certain teams and saying other ones should be number one? Number two, by logic, to break down the rest of the top 25, why not take the complete top 25 postseason 2019 and just move it to 2020? If you're doing that for number one, why don't you do that for everyone else?
Yeah, that's fair. It's a very weird blend of rewarding teams like LSU for the year before, because they lost everybody, it seems, and they're still in the top 5. And I don't think they're the 5th best team, but out of respect, they sort of do that. You could disagree, but they lost a lot, and they're definitely getting a bump from what might be the greatest season of all time last year. And then you've got them ranking the best teams and who they think is like sort of a power ranking best. And then you layer on top of that, it seems that they sometimes penalize teams because they think they'll lose to this team, or they're in the same division as this team. So they might even be better than some other teams, but they look at their schedule, they project a few losses, and they proactively move them down so that they don't have to adjust later. It's a very weird blend. It's not imperfect, and fortunately it doesn't really mean anything till you get to the end, so maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah, unless I'm missing something, there are basically two approaches, and you pretty much outlined them. I will deliver a top 25 that has nothing to do with schedules. I won't look at schedules. I simply say these are the 25 best teams in the country based on my projection and base what I believe. And so this is the first best team, the second best team, and so on down the line. And then people start to bring in, well, they got to play them and them and them. Well, my 5th best team in the country may play a daunting schedule. Therefore, I would rank them, project them to go 3rd in their conference or 13th in the country. But I don't do that. I'm not penalizing teams for games that have yet to be played.
Totally agree. I think it's completely unfair to penalize them for their schedule that they haven't played yet. I will say, I'm sort of not in either camp between the resume versus best team camp. I'm sort of in the camp of, well, when you're 0-0, I want to rank the best teams. And when you're at the end of the year, I want purely resume. And we're going to slowly blend from one to the other as we have a deeper resume to base it on. So by the end of the year, when we're picking playoff teams, that's pure resume. In the beginning of the year, that's pure how good I'm guessing you are, because there's no resume for the year, and we'll slowly transition throughout the year. It's imperfect blend, but I think that's the approach that's my view.
Ryan, I take the hardline resume approach to the extreme, meaning after week 1, my top 25 gains so much criticism, it's crazy. So Maryland beat Texas 2 consecutive years in week 1. I had them ranked like 6th or 7th in the country. Because in my estimation, they had the 6th or 7th best win of the weekend, and that was their resume to date.
Yeah, I mean that's more like standings, but I agree with you once we get to the end of the year, but it's just too silly at the beginning.
Why is it silly? Maryland beat Texas. We're estimating Texas to be a good team in that particular year. They won the game. Until they prove that they're not that good, why should they not be better and higher ranked than teams that don't have wins to that degree?
I think you could look and say, hey, you thought they were really good. I didn't, and I was right because the rest of their season. And if you're consistently wrong on making that guess, I think that says something.
I'm not making a guess. I'm not making a projection. I'm not telling people that Maryland's that good. I'm saying they've played one game and they beat a good football team. I'm not stating anything, and I get the same criticism you just laid out. You think Maryland's that good? No, I don't think they're that good. Look at my preseason prediction. I picked them to go 4-8. I don't think they're that good, but they just beat a really good football team, a very talented football team. So
Yeah, I
why
mean,
shouldn't they be rewarded for that? Why are we speculating how good and bad teams are going to be?
yeah, I mean that's the difference between standings and rankings, right? There's clearly speculation in rankings. I like to think that by the end of the year, it's a little bit more like standings, but even still, there's still some speculation.
Yeah, and it's going to be proven out.
Yeah,
Maryland's going to prove that they're not that good.
yeah.
So that's what's happened in the past. So anything else about the rankings that jump out to you?
No, I think they got the top two right. I definitely have some concerns about Clemson. Justin Ross obviously had the injury a couple weeks, a month ago, with his shoulder and is out for the year, and that's a big loss because it's on top of T. Higgins. So that's their two best wide receivers, and their receivers I call them like alpha receivers, where you can just kind of toss it up and let them win the jump ball, and both of them are gone. Clemson's depth chart came out and there's definitely a question mark at wide receiver. So they've got Joseph Ngata, who's a rising sophomore. It's sort of that spot, the 9 in the offense, the 9 wide receiver slot that is, and he's got a lot of potential and a lot of reason to be optimistic there. But he's unproven. And then on the other side of him, where uh, Justin Ross was, excuse me. Now you have Frank Ladson, who's also a sophomore, and he's also unproven. So the two big outside threats are totally unproven for Trevor Lawrence. Amari Rogers in the slot, which is great. And there's not a ton of depth behind them. EJ Williams, a freshman, is in the second string, and Cornell Powell, who's actually a redshirt senior, but hasn't really done much throughout his career, is also second string. So just not a lot of depth there. And then on top of that, just before we hopped on the air, we heard that defensive end Xavier Thomas will redshirt. He got COVID back in March. Then he got, or I don't know the order, but he also got strep throat. And it sounds like he's doing okay. He wasn't hospitalized, but when he came on campus, he just wasn't able to get up to game speed and just isn't going to be ready for a while. So they're hoping they can redshirt him and still use him in four games. You'd think that kind of the last 4 games, but that's another starter gone, and suddenly defensive end gets a little bit inexperienced. Justin Foster's a senior, and he'll start, but opposite him, now you're looking at KJ Henry, redshirt sophomore. He was a big prospect, but hasn't been counted on yet, so he'll be thrown into the fire. And then you've got some young guys, Miles Murphy, who's a freshman in the second string. So some question marks. It's going to be tough, and I think Ohio State is really, really dangerous.
And back to the rankings, no Florida State, Miami, or Louisville from the ACC. North Carolina, the only other ACC team that cracked the top 25 at number 19, and unranked, the second highest unranked team from 2019 postseason to make it into the top 25. Oklahoma State at number 16. So it speaks to, again, a bit of disrespect for what's been a down ACC for the last couple of years.
Well, you forgot something. At number 10 is the ACC's Notre Dame.
I didn't forget anything.
Notre Dame.
I didn't forget anything. I'm looking right at it. I don't consider Notre Dame part of the ACC.
Well, John Swaffer does, and that's going to be a very tough, probably the toughest matchup. Clemson's going to go up there in November. It's going to be cold, and that's going to be tough, a tough game. They don't have North Carolina on the schedule. North Carolina is one of the few lucky teams, one of the 4 lucky teams that doesn't have to play Clemson, so that gives them an advantage. But they may meet in Charlotte for the championship. But yeah, I mean the ACC is obviously down, but I think the way the has been adjusted, it's a harder road for Clemson than usual. They swapped out NC State, Louisville, South Carolina, and Akron for Miami, a game at Virginia Tech in December when it should be pretty darn cold and unusual for the Tigers, and then Pittsburgh. So the schedule might have gotten just slightly harder, which is pretty easy to do because they had the second weakest schedule in all of Power 5, only ahead of Syracuse. So not saying much to get tougher from that, but it did. So another obstacle for them.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we all love each and every day with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry. You can catch the work of Ryan Cantor at Shaking the Southland on SB Nation and also at TigerNet. We're looking at Clemson's schedule as Ryan just gave the treetop look at the additions and subtractions. And Ryan, what's the big deal about Southern teams coming north, complaining about the cold? I bet the average temperature mid-afternoon, although it should be a night game in South Bend the first week of November, has got to be 55 degrees.
I don't know. I guess we'll see. I do remember we played, or Clemson played Boston College late in the season, and it was going to be particularly cold that weekend. But in Clemson, it was like 1 or 2 degrees warmer than Boston College. So it was just a matter of timing. So yeah, it might not matter. I mean, obviously, at 55 degrees, it doesn't matter. But if it's 30 degrees in South Bend, or if it's, it gets pretty cold in Blacksburg and in December, that could be. And that's not to say that Virginia Tech's, they're used to it and, it's fine for them. No, but it's an additional element that influences the game more towards luck because, there might be more drops or more fumbles or whatever. Any sort of additional element like that is bad for the better team. So certainly that's not great for Clemson. So I think it's a legitimate thing to mention.
When you grow up in the North, the term is football weather. That's actually football weather.
Well, it sounds like watch it on TV weather to me, but it'll be great to watch it on TV.
I don't want to be at the game. It's fun to watch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So what are we looking at here? I know that when I broke down the ACC schedule, and I didn't do it after they announced the dates, I did it over the weekend after they announced the format and then the matchups, 5 at home, 5 on the road for everyone, that unlike any other conference, Ryan, again, it comes back to Clemson dominance. I'm looking at, first and foremost, my bullet point number 1 was who doesn't have to play Clemson, because that's almost an automatic loss. And then my second point was, okay, who doesn't play Notre Dame? Because although North Carolina could be as good, Miami is good, I think it's generally thought and projected that Notre Dame will be the second best team in the conference. And then some level of North Carolina, Miami, possibly Florida State, Louisville in that mix after that. But key is who doesn't play Clemson, and that's North Carolina, which gives them a step up. Of course, there are a number of teams that don't, but they're the obvious contender that doesn't play Clemson that sets them up well for a championship game match.
Yeah, and a lot of people, a real lot of people are picking them to play in that championship game against Clemson because they avoid them in the regular season, whereas Notre Dame hosts Clemson, as we were talking about. So that could potentially put Notre Dame in a hole. Of course, Notre Dame and North Carolina play, so that'll probably get settled on the field. But I think there's 3 teams that I think are widely being considered as pretty good teams in the ACC or better, with Clemson, Notre Dame, and North Carolina. I also think that Louisville, particularly on offense, is a sleeper. And if their defense can be decent, they could be a pretty dangerous team. They've got Javion Hawkins at running back, Tutu Atwell, a wide receiver. That's a pretty good duo there. They're well coached. I think they're sort of a sleeper there, and they avoid Clemson as well. And normally they wouldn't because they're in the same division. So I think they're the big sleeper.
Are you satisfied and agree with the way the schedule was approached by the ACC?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was some. Seldom do I compliment John Swofford, but I love what he did. And the rumors that I heard were that he heard that the SEC was going to go conference only, and he dropped the ACC's plan out publicly right before that. So it became extremely clear that it was the SEC who was backing out of all the big rivalry games. I've also heard that South Carolina was the only SEC team that fought to keep it. whereas Florida and Georgia and Kentucky did not and were happy to back out. So, of course, we could say the weaker conference was clearly scared of the ACC, and they're just trying to be careful. Obviously, that's the only logical conclusion.
Yeah, that's the only one I can come up with as well. I don't think there's any question about that. The SEC running again from everyone around college football. No question there. All right, so we got a number one ranking. We got an ACC schedule that includes Notre Dame, which should spice things up in regards to an interesting championship matchup. And before that, of course, weeks before that, November 7th, they keep the Clemson matchup at Notre Dame in South Bend, and then an open date before a date at Florida State. Virginia Tech on the road, as you mentioned, the first week of December could be an interesting matchup with the Hokies looking to be pretty strong. They also, I made the mistake of citing North Carolina as the only other ACC team in the preseason coaches top 25, Virginia Tech at number 24.
So Clemson gets Notre Dame at 10, Virginia Tech at 24, and in a potential championship game could also get North Carolina. So again, I'm not saying Clemson's schedule is great. Ohio State, for example, even though they lost Oregon, just playing in a better conference gives them an obvious edge there. But Clemson's schedule did get a lot harder, and I think moving away from the same old games in the same division. Unfortunately, they still get Wake Forest, Syracuse, and Boston College, which are the three that I think people are most sick of, particularly Syracuse. But at least to mix in some new teams, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, Miami, that we don't see, really very often except in championship games, I think adds some spice to it. And I think it's something Clemson, or the ACC rather, should just do long term.
Your favorite team, North Carolina State, is the only team in the ACC that misses Clemson, Notre Dame, Miami, and North Carolina.
It's unbelievable. Well, maybe there won't be a expansive bowl season, and they'll still not go to a bowl. We'll have to see.
Ryan Cantor, you can check out his work at Shaking the Southland, SB Nation, also Tiger Net.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's been great talking to you. Thanks for having me on.